Welcome to Startup Different. I'm Dave, your Chief Podcast Officer. With me is my brother and podcast sidekick, Chris. We're two successful entrepreneurs paying it forward by debunking startup myths, tackling the toughest challenges, and giving you the tools to build your business. Today, we're going to be talking about co-founders and why they matter. And no, you don't have to start a business with your brother. Let's do it. Hello, Startup Different listeners. Listening to our pod. I love the pod. Hey, Chris, how are you, buddy?
I'm good.
Really?
How are you? Yeah.
Hey, you're wearing a white shirt.
Yeah.
What is it? It was after Labor Day. What moon is it? I think we only have like 7 or 8 episodes, and it's like we've already got an inside reference. I'm pretty happy about that.
Nice.
I'm wearing my pumpkin spiced latte colored shirt today.
Oh, delicious.
Yeah. Actually, I find it kind of strong sometimes. Is that weird? I guess it depends.
Yeah, it's a strong flavor. Yeah. I don't know.
Truffle or truffle? No. What's in it? What is it? What is pumpkin spice? It's not actually pumpkin that often, right?
Like, I feel like I like it during the season, but then I quickly grow tired of it, and I'm glad it goes away.
Yeah. Yeah, like
and that comes back. Yeah.
Like I have one of those Nespressos, right? And I bought, like last year I was like, oh, the pumpkin spice. They have like a special capsule and all that. I was like, sweet, I'm going to get in on that. And like, everybody's going to love it. And then I bought it and I was like, I hate this. No offense to the Nespresso people. They actually make a fantastic product. I love it generally. But those ones weren't so good. They just tasted really artificial. It was like, what am I drinking? What is this?
To the people of Nespresso, I appreciate what you're trying to do for me here, but it's a bit much.
It's just like it just tasted artificial, even if I made a big latte out of it or whatever. But, it's nice. I mean, you're not really a fancy drink kind of guy either. You're more of a just jet fuel coffee kind of guy.
Yeah, black coffee. That's it. Yeah, no pollutants of any kind in the coffee.
I remember when I was back at Bell, there was this coffee machine on the second floor of our office. And there was like no setting for anything but just black coffee. And it came out so dark. It was light could not escape its surface. Like it was so powerful. I'd be so wired. Which I guess is mission accomplished. That's what they're trying to do, right? So
yeah. Or have some more coffee and go back to work.
Yeah. Those were good times. Good times for sure. Anyway, hey, today's a fun topic. I mean, they're all fun topics, but today's a really fun topic. We get to talk about co-founders. You're a co-founder.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah.
I'm a co-founder. Somebody listening today is hopefully a co-founder.
We're weird co-founders, though. We're brother co-founders, which is
we have
like
family business. Which
the
is
best
kind of
and the worst kind of co-founders at the same time.
I said it in the intro that you don't have to start a business with your brother, but I think it would be interesting to go out there and talk to other brother co-founders. There's actually more of us than I thought. Brother or sister, by the way, siblings in general. There's actually a lot more out there than I thought. I thought that was pretty rare. I don't think it is. I'm just going to make this up. 87% of all statistics are made up. I'm going to say that like 10% of startups are brothers or
siblings.
Yeah. Siblings. Yeah.
That sounds high to me.
We'll find out right after this.
We were at Collision in Toronto, which is a conference for startups. Yeah, we collid. And
we collided.
But I think one of the first companies that we talked to at one of their booths it was two brothers. And we were like, oh my God.
Hey, wow, you're doing it too. How's it going? Well, I remember there was a guy on stage, though, too. There was some guy who was talking. This is terrible. I wish I could give those companies a shout out because, obviously that's kind of what we're doing here. But there was another guy on stage, though, who it's going to drive me nuts. But he was a brother co-founder, and I think he actually had 2 other brothers in it. But we can talk about that in a minute. So, okay, let's talk about this. So why does a co-founder matter? There's a bunch of things here. So a lot of things we want to address today. So I want to circle around some data. And then kind of talk about like what to be looking for and that kind of stuff. But the first thing I want to address, and because I had this sort of weird feeling too, I don't know, it's just like insecurity probably, was that I wanted to believe that I could do it all by myself. You may have industry experience, you may be arrogant like I was, maybe still am. You know how to build the thing. maybe there's a case that you can actually do it by yourself. But there's sort of like a should you element of all this. What do you think, Chris? I mean, Chris was actually just sorry, Chris. I like that I asked you a question immediately, trample you. But I just do want to say that Chris, being older than me, was actually a solo entrepreneur for years. So what do you think about it?
Yeah, I was 10 years older than Dave when I started my business in like
still
2002. Yeah, I was
working on that youth machine. But anyway,
but yeah, I graduated from computer science in 2002. Started a business right after that because it was like the .com bust had just happened, so there wasn't a ton of jobs. So why not start a business? And was doing it just myself for a long time. And yeah, like I got to be honest with you, you get in your own echo chamber, and some of the ideas you come up with are not the greatest, and you're too close to the problem. A whole bunch of things. Had a really tough time scaling, and actually, going like trying to do both sides, do the the technical side, build the products, but also do the like CEO, sales rep, marketing, get customers side at the same time was just brutal. It really difficult to do both. You'd kind of lose track of one or the other. You'd be doing too much sales stuff and then forget about your product development side, and vice versa. So
did you try to I feel like you would have also, because you naturally only have so much time, and being somebody who's like coding things, and I know that Chris also is the hardest working person in the universe. No offense to anybody out there, but this guy works hard.
Sure, there's people that work hard.
Whatever.
But
yeah, see, look at he's humble too. But the reality is, I think that because you only had so much time, I'm sure you started to look to like outsource stuff.
Yeah.
Like I think about your sales approach. Like you were all channel based, right? And and channel, by the way, sorry, I love one piece of feedback we got was we need more context. So channels, for those who don't know at home, is like a channel partner is like somebody else going out and selling your product. So that's what I'm talking about in this case.
Yeah.
So did you have that? You did have that.
Yeah, we did do that. We were selling document management software. Our dad owned a photocopier dealership, so we were trying to sell document management software with like photocopier dealers as the resellers of the software, which was a bit of a stretch to say the least. They had like really good skills like mechanically to fix photocopiers, things like that, but their software side, like dealing with servers, this was like pre-cloud. There weren't any clouds back then. It was all on-prem.
It was a clear blue sky every day.
The clouds, there was no clouds. Yeah. But so it made it challenging when we were trying to do that. And then kind of managing the channel partners, they weren't really actively going out and trying to sell. They were just like order takers. They wanted to have a physical territory, and, they wanted us to do all the marketing. And
we'll talk about it later. That's definitely another podcast. I'd love to have actually a guest for that one. Maybe some folks from Rave, because that was really fun, but and insanely difficult. But anyway,
but going back to the founder thing, like that was kind of like, like I'd had no other option. I kind of like, well, I can't do everything, so I got to try and see if I can get these other guys to sell it, and then maybe I can do the more technical side of it. And that kind of worked to a point, but had a really hard time scaling it, and just being pulled in a million different directions was really tough as like solo entrepreneur for 10 years. Yeah.
So this is a good segue. Like, what does the data say? And it's actually an interesting picture. And we'll provide references for this, after the fact, and we'll probably have a blog post. Check us out at startupdifferent.com. But the first thing that's big here is that 80% of all billion-dollar companies launched since 2005 have had 2 or more founders. So most businesses, most startups are co-founders. Part of this is a bias. So as a lot of people know, so we have very, very strong feelings about venture capital, especially early seed funding, especially for software companies. That's another episode in its entirety, and I actually am super looking forward to it. But the one thing to understand here is that VCs generally prefer co-founders for reasons we're going to get into later. More or less, though, just so it's a more balanced team and there's a more balanced workload, and generally 2 brains are better than 1, which might sound, again, counterintuitive to a lot of you folks who think, hey, I can do this by myself, or I already have, or whatever. That's true, you probably can, but there's advantages to having 2 people that are aligned and invested and willing to go to the mat for the business. This does also, so to that point, there's actually, if it's 80% are billion-dollar companies, there's 20% that can sort of that have gone it alone and been really successful. But the data is kind of misleading even on that what they found, and this is, I believe, a Harvard Business Review piece, what they found was that these solo founders actually do end up having a ton of support, whether it's early employees, benefactors, corporate alliances, investors, mentors, whatever. They just don't literally have a co-founder. Like, they never like split the equity. They never change the cap table so that there's another person operating the business with them. Like, ultimately though, there was a team, whether they're called co-founders or not. So
Right.
it's kind of interesting. Like, most of these businesses, in almost, which makes sense, especially for $1 billion enterprise. Like, can you imagine that echo chamber if you were by yourself?
Yeah,
Like,
it'd be tough. And I when I think back to my time, I didn't have a ton of success, but definitely made a living and did probably better than my peers. But just didn't make it like big. But I did have at that time, like our dad was kind of in the background, and I had other people that were kind of in the background that kind of were supporting me, and I could sound ideas off of things like that. Just wasn't like the same, like, every day of the week, working with another co-founder. It wasn't that same kind of thing. It was, few and far between conversations that kind of kept me going. Yeah.
There's something about that frequency, being able to like really just literally like spin your chair. Be like, hey, what do you think of this? That's obviously pretty important as well.
Makes me think of All Day Breakfast. Because
ADB?
that was kind of like, well, no, not
ADB.
That's another tangent. But Dave and I, you and I, we went for lunch every day because like when we were building our business, it was kind of like the only time we could actually talk to each other without like the rest of the team hearing anything we were saying. We were all in close quarters.
Tough to do in a tight co-working space,
to
exactly. Get like executive time, so to speak.
So we basically said to our staff, like, we go out for lunch, and that is our time that we talk about, our stuff, privately. And so we would sometimes go out for lunch with our staff, but most of the time it was just the two of us. And
honestly, pretty rarely, which sounds almost mean, but we needed to do it. We needed that time.
It was the only time we had really to discuss stuff. So worked out well. We definitely favored the all day breakfast type lunch places, which we were pretty addicted to.
Sunset Grill. What was that one in the hotel that was really good?
Oh, man. Over Easy.
Oh, yeah, it's gone now.
Yeah, I know.
R.I.P.
A lot of them are gone after the pandemic, unfortunately. I know. But
we could have given like in 2019, we could have had like a totally separate business that was just like food reviews of breakfast places, and it would have been good.
Toronto.
Oh yeah. People would have gone there. It's I mean, maybe people call that Google Maps, but I think otherwise we would have had some ideas for you. But I digress.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that the research, so there's other research that also suggests that solo founders can also be stronger than co-founders in circumstances that you'd probably think. So as an example, for faster decision making. But that's kind of like a weird qualification, because faster isn't always better, for one thing,
right?
And the data also, like, it whitewashes a ton of I think that are very important, a ton of the complementary elements of two co-founders, such as burden sharing, for one thing, just dealing with the stress of a business and getting through that, and obviously complementary skills, like being able to work together on a particular issue or tackle problems together. Sort of like four hands are better than two kind of idea. So
I think we'll probably do a podcast episode where we're talking about like how to fight with your co-founder.
Well, we can talk a bit about it today, but I think we can go really deep on that for sure.
Because we had some great fights, like some
particularly
volcano
early
fights. Yeah.
Well,
and a lot of it.
A lot of the time.
I know. Oh yeah. It was, especially me being older and stuff like that too. And like, so we're lucky in that our skills are very complementary. Like I was the tech guy, Dave, you were the sales marketing guy. And that was good. But there were times when it was like business, like direction decisions. And it was like my gut instincts versus your gut instincts.
Yeah.
And we were not aligned. I think one of the things I remember is I remember going to a conference or something like that, and I'm bumping into another person who had started a business with a sibling. And he said, how's that going? Because I told him that we were working together. And I said, yeah, we have very candid conversations, kind of like implying, yeah, we fight, and he said, well, as long as you just keep having those conversations, as long as you keep talking. And so that was like one of the things that we definitely learned is that, keep talking
I think it's about having a tool set.
Yeah.
Something you can hang on to or reference to work through business discussions, read as business arguments, which I'll say for us too were a lot more common in the early days. And part of that was because we didn't have a structure. We didn't know that well. I actually imagine this being a problem for most co-founders, because what you don't really know a person until you kind of get business married to them, like you do with a co-founder. Like once you go down that road, you're going to really understand that person, the way they work, the way they think. Like I understand that Chris is pretty black and white, very binary, if we'd like to put it that way, when it comes to certain addressing
software
certain
developer
issues.
It's called Boolean.
That sounds much more impressive. You're so Boolean, bro. Boolean, bro. You should get a shirt with that. That's cool. But I think again, going back to this, like having tools to be able to address this. So one tool for us was understanding that we would need more data and any form of data. We early on in the business, you just don't have much data. There's just you're just trying to figure it out, and you're kind of going by the seat of your pants. So when we would have an argument, I would say to Chris, okay, or Chris would say to me in some cases, okay, let's cool off. Let's go find something to support positions and try to figure that out. And I think it's also worth mentioning here too, Chris, that one of the tools that we were taught in business school, and this was really beneficial for us as co-founders, was the value of consensus as opposed to voting. You know what I mean? That's one thing I think that you really had to convince the other person.
Other.
Yeah. So I mean, part of that is being open. So another tool is be open to be convinced, be coachable. There's a lot that your co-founder is going to bring to the table, and definitely don't vote on stuff, because if you vote on stuff and the vote will implicit, which sounds weird. It sounds like I'm like anti-democratic. I'm not. I think consensus though is a better form of it, because if you go to vote and you lose that vote, you're going to be pissed off and you're going to harbor that resentment against
somebody
your
wins,
co-founder.
Somebody loses, right?
Somebody loses.
A vote. Yeah. And then so if if you're one of the co-founders, you're always losing at some point, it's better to get the data and convince the other person so that it's consensus. It's all right. We've gotten the data. We agree on it. We talked about it a long time, and we're going to take a run at this approach to this problem.
For what it's worth too, I just want to mention that when we talk about voting, I'm not talking about, obviously if you're two co-founders and you each vote separately, then you're still deadlocked. And I'm talking about like, you would never vote with other staff either, because then all of a sudden you're bringing them into your thing. And then the other thing too is with equity. So equity, I was listening to another podcast, My First Million. I think it's actually a very fun podcast. One of those guys said, one of the things he really regretted in his early businesses was he would always be loosey-goosey with his cap table. So that is how much equity he had in the business. I'll tell you one thing that's an absolute must for a co-founder is splitting your equity evenly, 50-50. No games. Nobody's 51-49. No one's 60-40. And I've had two things come back at me when I say this to people. One is, well, then how do you break a deadlock? Are you serious? You're going to use equity to break a deadlock. Ooh. Like you can't, if you do that, you can kiss it goodbye. Like that's, why don't you just say, I'm better than you? That's your argument for that. And
I think too, don't, when you're first starting especially a software company and you're the technical person in the founder group, you're going to spend way more time building that product than they're going to spend on all their stuff. And you need to understand that you're putting in more hours at the beginning, and probably less later on. But it'll even out over time. But at first it's going to feel terrible because you're probably going to be doing working every day of the week and evenings and the whole shooting match. And they're going to be coming in 9 to 5. And CTOs, prospective CTOs out there, you just got to eat it. Okay.
For a
Just
bit
got to
anyway.
do
It
it.
works out in the long
Yeah.
run, I think.
It does, but it's not going to feel fair at the beginning.
No.
And you don't want to start using that. Well, I'm doing way more hours than you, so I should win this argument. That kind of stuff is just
It's
not a good way to
honestly,
go.
it's kind of like marital advice because you don't want to I know it's
Ugh.
business married. I know it's a little bit weird, but the second thing here, you know, well, I guess so. In that case, you don't want to be keeping score. Keeping score is bad. You're rowing together. You're working together. You're trying your best. You got to believe that fundamentally. Definitely don't half-ass it as the sales side, even if you're doing a 9 to 5. Like work hard. Show them what you're doing. Show the value you're bringing. And by the way, equity is going to lock in that alignment. If you're evenly in the business, you're both going to be super committed to rowing in the same direction. So it's really good to do this equity split. But the second piece here too is like if you're thinking that, oh, I need a little bit more equity so that I can control that other person, you're probably not willing to make them a co-founder. You might not be ready for a co-founder. Is the other piece here.
Good point. Good point.
So there's like a second component that if you're not willing to go down that road, then there might be a reason for that. And maybe you need to reevaluate where you are or where your headspace is or your expectations around co-founders. So something to be considered there. So now I did want to talk about, though, we kind of, that's a lot of actually our experience, which I think is helpful. Now for you though, you listener, what do you look for in a co-founder? I think is really important. And I want to talk about this in two ways. There's one really easy one, and the second one is a little bit more nuanced. And the easy one is alignment. So what is alignment? Just to be, again, context. Alignment is, do you both have the same vision for the business and for your personal and professional goals? Is one of you the ideas person? That's not going to work. You got to both do work to do this. Does one of you want to build a cell, or does the other one want to build an empire?
Or does one of you want to have it as kind of like a cottage industry, side hustle,
what's the lifestyle business?
Lifestyle,
I hate that term. But lifestyle business. Yeah.
Like you're trying to hey, I only want to work like 2 hours a day and then I want to spend the rest of my time windsurfing or something like that. Or are you like, specific. Okay, we've got a really good business opportunity. We want to like hustle and, capture this market and grow it and, be acquired or go public or something like that. You really have to be on the same page on what you're trying to accomplish with the business. Yeah.
That's a big deal. If you come into it and, one person is, I want to build an empire, and the other person is, I'm trying to pay off my student debt, that's going to be a problem, because that you're fundamentally misaligned with how you're going to deal with early capital. One of you wants to it personally, the other one wants it for the business, to reinvest in the business. You will fight instantly. So I almost feel like, without going too nuts, maybe have a bulleted list of what your mission is, what your values are, and what you're trying to accomplish. And that can change. When it will change, that's fine. But at least something to start with, so you ensure that you've got kind of this alignment buy-in before you do anything.
Absolutely. Yep.
And then secondly, and this is obvious but nuanced, is skills. The actual things that each of you do. So Chris and I are super complementary. I am a little bit more of a risk taker. I'm marketing and sales. I can, I mean this in the right way, Chris, but I think I can manage people pretty well. And Chris, for his part, way more risk averse, way more detail oriented, and like practically speaking, can make the thing, can code the software, which I can't do. So there's this element of skills that's important, but I think it goes beyond that. I think what we're trying to focus on, sort of those overlapping skills. And what does it mean to you, like an overlapping sort of like founder?
Yeah. So like when I think about you don't give yourself enough credit that you're actually quite technical. You had a development environment on your laptop. You were making adjustments, like you were coding parts of our marketing website. Like you're highly technical. So you really get it from a technical perspective. Sometimes. Yeah. And so that was really beneficial, because you could be doing a sales call and you could dive into some of the technical side of it. Whereas with me, I wouldn't say I was great, but I could kind of go on a demo and show the product product. I knew like enough to be like, explain the different, features and benefits and how the product worked, and kind of do sort of the sales marketing thing, just definitely not as good as you could do it. But those, having some of those overlapping skills were really important, especially like there would be times where, hey, we were just like double booked and, we needed to do 2 demos at once and there was only the 2 of us. So I could go on and actually do some of that. Or, you could help me with some of the technical side. Like we had to build prototypes for a bunch of clients and you were taking on some of that like technical side of the business. So I think having those overlapping skills is incredibly valuable.
The reverse is true too. You could sell. Your problem is you would give away the farm. You just couldn't negotiate the price very well. But you could sell. I mean, you were a solo entrepreneur for years. You understood the importance of being sort of like a sales organization as a startup, as opposed to being a, we build software. It's actually we sell software. It's like what we do. That's a big deal. And that's also a big alignment piece, I would argue as well. I guess the point here is, in the first case, don't start a company with another you. 2 salespeople, 2 CTOs, these are bad ideas. You need obviously skills that are different, but if you think about that Venn diagram of the complementary skills, that overlapping area is really important. Like your minimum requirement is complementary skills. Your best case scenario is founders that can sort of dabble in the strengths of each other. That's the overlapping founder concept. It's not really like a fixed demarcation of what you can and can't do. It's more like you can both understand each other. I was technical, as Chris is sort of alluding to, I was technical enough to be able to step into a meeting and talk about it or understand it. I got really good at cybersecurity by the end of it. That took training though and time, but I trained that to get better at that. I knew that was important. That's what you want to think about for co-founder. You want to think about, okay, how can I assist my other co-founder in understanding and solving problems? And a lot of that's going to reflect on having abilities or even developing abilities that overlap with the other side. The other thing I couldn't do when we first started is I couldn't do any design. I couldn't design anything. Then I got really good at that. And actually mostly from things that you showed me. And then all of a sudden I was taking that on, but we could always have conversations about it that were like reasonably well put together. We would understand why we like stuff and didn't like other stuff. So that was very, very, very important.
And that was one of the benefits of you, is that you could pick stuff up technical that was, very quickly I could show you in like 20 minutes, show you something in like Photoshop on how to, tear apart a logo and, make base graphics for an app. And you could then repeat that and we're really good at it.
And to other team members too. Like I could train the implementation team. I could go to the salespeople and say, this is what's involved in this. Like you're better off as a company when your founders can dabble. Can have those overlapping skills. Yeah. Not too much. You don't want to be, I don't think it would make sense for me to start coding, but it did make sense for me to understand code. It didn't make sense for Chris to start selling, but it did make sense for him to understand what the customers were talking about.
Yeah. I think there were times when I went to trade shows and, helped salespeople set up. When you were busy, we had 2 trade shows happening at the same time and I would go to one, you'd go to the other, things like that. So being able to dabble, is super important. Yeah.
So conclusion here, co-founders are common. They are a good approach. They need to have alignment. They need to have skills. We had tools to deal with co-founder mayhem, especially when you're brothers and you have a next level of candidness. I think broadly speaking, though, you're better off with a co-founder for tons of reasons. And no, they don't have to be your brother, but they could be family. They could be, and that's fine. That still works. Just have the tools to be able to manage that relationship.
Right on.
Sweet. Another episode in the books. Folks, we'll see you next week. Thanks so much for joining us. Rate the pod. All right, I'll talk to you later. See ya. Thanks for joining us. If you like what you heard, subscribe to and rate Startup Different in your favorite podcast app. If you want to see our radio faces, check us out on YouTube at Startup Different and look us up on social. We're probably there if you are. And lastly, do you want to feature your startup on the show? Reach out via our website, startupdifferent.com. See you next time.